New Brunswick has a rich heritage. Our recent history goes back to the 1530s when Jacques Cartier first visited the area and named the Bay of Chaleur. Much of that history is reflected in the homes we've built. For the most part, they highlight our English and French roots. But there are elements of other cultures as well. Many of those early houses still stand today. They are monuments to our ancestors and our past. Each has its own story. Join us now as we visit some of the great homes of New Brunswick.
Victoria Manor in Riverside, Albert, near Moncton, was built in the mid-1890s by Abner McClellan, a former lieutenant governor of New Brunswick. When his term expired in 1902, he moved here to live the life of a country gentleman. The house is a magnificent structure, and it's been restored and furnished as it was when it was built. Bill and Joan McFarlane are the owners now, and today we'll meet them and historian James West as we tour Victoria Manor. You can find Victoria Manor about 60 kilometers south of Moncton. It's in Riverside, Albert, the village that was formed in 1966 when the two communities, Riverside and Albert, decided to amalgamate. The population is 415. That's been in decline in recent years, but of late there's been a big improvement in tourism-related businesses starting up, and plans are underway to have Riverside, Albert established as a Fundy historic village because of the many heritage homes and historic buildings found there, one of which is Victoria Manor. James West is a retired businessman. He became interested in history and heritage homes when he inherited the letters and records of his ancestors from the Edwardian era. He's been studying them for 40 years. He's co-author of Shadows of the Past, a book of photos and historical sketches of Albert County that was written for the Albert County Historical Society. One of the persons he's researched is Abner McClellan, who had Victoria Manor built. What do we know about him?
He was the member of the Legislative Assembly in New Brunswick many years previous to Confederation in 67. And in 67, he, like many others, was invited to join the Senate. So he became a senator in 67 and was a senator until 95 or 96, when he was appointed lieutenant governor for New Brunswick.
Why he built this house here?
Well, not really, but we can suppose that as his appointment as lieutenant governor was appearing, or did appear, that he felt that this house would be much more appropriate, which of course it was.
How would you characterize its style?
I think Queen Anne style, and which the architect who built it had been engaged in building in both California and Evansville in Indiana. The governor's brother-in-law, Watson E. Reed, he had worked previously with his brother in California for a year and a half, or perhaps two, and then came here and designed this house.
What are some of the features of the Queen Anne style?
Well,
the Queen Anne style of architecture.
The Queen Anne style was certainly in North America for many years, but very much so in the 80s and 90s. And this is where Watson learned the style as he worked with his brother in California. And when he came home, he built an identical style in this house.
How long did the house stay in the McClellan family?
Well, it was sold in 1924 when Anna died, shortly thereafter.
Anna was his wife?
Anna was his wife.
Who's lived in it since?
Oh, there's been 3 or 4 owners since 1924. The first of which was Samuel B. Sterrett. Samuel was a writer of some note, it was rented to the RCMP for perhaps 5 or 10 years. I think this was during the ownership of Mr. William Spencer.
That has been used as sort of a rental property over the years at some times.
Well, I think perhaps that was the only time that it was rented. And then following that, it was bought by a local lady who I think lived here for a few years. And I've forgotten the reason for her having sold it. And, well, of course, it was acquired by Mr. McFarland probably about 15 or 18 years ago.
Bill McFarland was originally from New Brunswick, but went down the road to Ontario in 1949. He decided to come back in 1962. He needed somewhere to live, so he went house hunting and found this big old house in what is now Riverside, Albert.
We drove past and looked at the house, quite large, and thought it was quite nice, and we noticed it was empty, and checked on who owned it. And that's how we came about. When we talked to the owner, he said that he would rather us rent it for the first year, and which we did. We rented it for a year, and then finally we made arrangements to buy it.
What did you know about its history?
We didn't know very much at the time. I don't think anyone around here knew very much about the house. Of course, we were intrigued by the stained glass window in the front of the house of Queen Victoria, and then finally found out that it had been owned by Abner McClellan, who was the Lieutenant Governor of the province from, I think it was 1897 to 1901, and that added something to it.
What was it you liked about the house the first time you saw it?
Well, I don't know, it was such a large house, and it was just nice looking.
I thought it was quite dark when I first came. It doesn't get, the only room that really lights up is the dining room. The rest of it's quite dark, so I always open all the doors.
What kind of shape was the house in back then, Bill?
The pillars in the basement, they were kind of going, so we had a man come down from Hillsborough, put new supports in, wooden supports. And, but the house generally was in very good condition. There's no broken windows, like you would expect in an area in which a house was vacant. The house was, as I say, in perfect shape.
What have you done to it since you've been here?
The only thing we've done is put a deck on the back of the house and screen it in.
The Great Homes of New Brunswick continues in a moment. We're back to the Great Homes of New Brunswick. Bill worked for Via Rail in Moncton until he retired, but he'd been in the antique business in Ontario and continued with that as a sideline as well. His well-trained eye saw the historical value in Victoria Manor, and he and his wife Joan have been busy restoring, renovating, and filling it with antiques ever since. What about the furniture? Are there any original pieces still here?
There's one piece, a sideboard in the dining room, was in the house when we arrived. All the rest of the furnishings I brought from Ontario. We had bought them especially for this house.
Can you describe some of the pieces for me? For instance, that roll-top desk behind you.
There's quite a story behind that. I bought that from Joan's husband, and Joan never expected to have it in the house that she was going to occupy. Well, this piece here, this rosewood coffee table, is especially nice. And there's a piece in the next room, which is a gaming table, which is very nice, from England. Most of the furnishings came from England. And this clock, the grandfather clock, we understood came out of a castle in Scotland. they had told me it was, they thought around 1730.
There's a piece in the kitchen, a big cupboard in the corner kitchen, and he got it from the
I bought it from a Mennonite.
Mennonite.
I knew the chap's daughter. Mennonites are very hard to get anything from because all their money goes back into the land. And his daughter said, I would like to buy this piece of furniture. And he said, well, he didn't really need the money, didn't really want the money. Everything goes into the land. But because I was a friend, he said he would sell it. So he said to me, this big cabinet which is made of mahogany, black mahogany, he said, would $8 be too much? $8, like even in those days, I can tell you it wasn't too much.
Yeah.
But he didn't want any more because we offered him more because it was worth a lot more.
The house has 22 rooms. Joan, what's your favorite room?
Well, the master bedroom's nice. They're all big. They're all nice and large.
What's it like living in the house?
I've lived here so long, it's just like any house you live in. I mean, the thing I like about the area is it's nice and quiet. You don't hear a lot of noise. You can walk out in the front of the house at night. You can stand still and hear nothing. And that is really an ideal situation.
Joan, do you entertain friends very often?
Yeah, we had 3 Christmas parties last year, and we started having a tea on the Victoria Day. We let people, if we see anybody outside, we always ask them if they'd like to come in and go through it. A lot of people like to go through old houses. And we had 7 people come last week, and we let them come through. I got a beautiful card today thanking me for letting them come through the house. They really appreciated it.
Bill, what are the grounds like?
Well, the grounds are quite spacious. There's a lot of mowing, a lot of plants, thanks to Joan. Joan is the gardener. And we have a pond. We have fish in the pond. And I have a drive-on mower, so not really takes a lot of the chores out of the grass mowing.
And I noticed you have quite a few bird boxes out there, too.
Oh, yes, we have swallows. We have tree swallows. 3 tree swallows, and they're always occupied. And I have a feeder, a bird feeder for the blue jays. And then we always make sure we feed pheasants. We get a lot of pheasants here. And we put cracked corn out for the pheasants. So we have lots of bird life. And as a matter of fact, yesterday we have acquired a squirrel. A little red squirrel is around. Of course, they're not too welcome as far as the birds are concerned, the bird houses, but they're there.
Is there anything peculiar about the house? Does it have secret rooms, secret passageways, anything like that?
Well, in the attic, you can go between the walls. There's 3 openings, 3 doors, 3 little doors. And I suppose the idea was for the workmen to go between the walls in case there's any problem with the roof. We were told by Mr. Spencer that there's a passageway we have a well in the basement, and from the well area, apparently you can go 100 feet underground. By now, they say it's probably caved in, but they used to bring water from a well that was about 100 feet from the house.
Joan, what do you like most about living here?
Well, it's quiet, and the neighbors, we haven't, it's nice neighbors, and we can spend all day in the house working. We don't have to go to the malls or...
What plans do you have for the future of the house?
We don't really know. I mean, going to happen in the future. We're hoping, I'm hoping I can stay here as long as I live. I would like to stay here as long as I live.
The future of Victoria Manor is uncertain. How do you split one house between 19 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren? There are some who have suggested that the McFarlands leave the house to an historical society. So far, they're undecided, but they'd really rather keep the house in the family.